Hello and welcome to the Week 15 Waiver Wire Show. Today, we'll be discussing the top waiver wire pickups as we enter the fantasy postseason, including playoff stashes and deeper league targets. Be sure to stay tuned until the end, where we answer listener questions sent in on Twitter. It was an interesting week, man. I mean, if you look in our tier 1 of waiver wire ads, we have Zay Jones, Ty Chandler, and Elijah Moore. Zay Jones had the role that I thought that he would have in the wake of the Christian Kirk injury. He had an absurd role, led the entire week in expected fantasy points at the wide receiver position. However, was facing Cleveland. Trevor Lawrence's ankle was messed up. Zay Jones isn't that good. And you combine all that together and you get really low output from Zay Jones. However, I think you got to be pretty optimistic about him going forward. And I would also have him as my number one add at the wide receiver position this week. Sam, any further thoughts on Zay Jones and people's ability to start him in the fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. A couple things I'll add is Jacksonville has a pretty decent schedule in the fantasy playoffs. They get Baltimore in week 15, which is a bit of a tough matchup, but at least they probably will be forced to throw a lot in that game, assuming Baltimore puts up points against their defense. Then they get both Tampa Bay and Carolina in week 16 and 17. Both those defenses have been pretty beatable through the air. And yeah, man, the role is just going to be so good for Zay Jones. And even though the results haven't really been there, this past week or even really this year in general, we know last year he put up 4 games of over 22 fantasy points, including some huge ones down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs. So I know people have questions a bit on Zay Jones' talent, but we've seen the spike weeks in this offense as recently as last year. You have to feel awesome about the role. I don't really see an argument for adding anyone else besides him on this list if he's available this week.
Yeah, I mean, the Bucs have turned into the biggest pass phone in the league. I mean, Desmond Ridder ripped them up. Drake London ripped them up. The Falcons actually took a pass-heavy approach because they were playing the Bucs. And so that week, what is that, week 16 game at Tampa for Zay Jones, I mean, that's a really good spot. So if nothing else, I'd be adding Zay Jones to block an opponent from getting him and also have a chance to start him on my team. Ty Chandler news is Alexander Mattison left with a sprained ankle. I have not seen an update on how bad Alexander Madison's sprained ankle is, but they do not have a lot. And it's been clear, though, that they don't like Ty Chandler. They don't want to expand his role, even as Alexander Madison has struggled. So I don't want to get too overly excited here, but they do not have a lot. They're going to be going to Nick Mullins at quarterback. I don't feel great about Ty Chandler, but running backs don't come available this late, this often. And hopefully you guys have been stashing this one injury away running back. I know we've talked about it a ton over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Ty Chandler was an example of the one injury away running backs. How excited are you to add Ty Chandler this week?
Yeah, I think on the positive side for Chandler, you mentioned Minnesota hasn't really shown an inclination to use him, but man, the only other running back they have left now besides him is Kene Nwangwu, who's a kick return specialist. Basically, I don't know, he has maybe 5 to 10 carries across his entire NFL career. He's really not a player on offense. They'll probably call up someone here. I'm spacing on who the latest special teams call up is in Minnesota. It might be Myles Gaskin potentially. But anyways, whoever they call up, I expect Ty Chandler just to get a massive workload in week 15. On the negative side, it's like, man, yeah, this Vikings running back position really has not produced much fantasy points for us all year. They've been kind of pass happy throughout. They don't really target the running backs in the passing game that much. So it's not the best role. I don't feel great about Nick Mullins really, but in terms of these other running backs, and we'll talk through some of them later, I have the most role certainty on Ty Chandler over some of these other guys in this list. So due to that, I think he's the top running back pickup of the week.
And good schedule too. At Bengals this week, then home versus Lions, home versus Packers. So, pretty good schedule here for Vikings. But again, we'll wait and see on how hurt Alexander Mattison is exactly. Elijah Moore, Joe Flacco has been aggressive and throwing a ton. That flows through to Elijah Moore. I think he's fine. I would have Zay Jones pretty clearly ahead of Elijah Moore personally, but I wouldn't necessarily hold this Elijah Moore disappointing game against him. Amari Cooper and David Njoku both soaked up a ton of targets. Any Elijah Moore thoughts here, Sam?
Yeah, it's just as simple as Joe Flacco is keeping this passing offense afloat. We obviously saw the spike week in terms of fantasy production this week go to David Njoku, but I think Elijah Moore could have his big games. Again, not the greatest playoff schedule coming up. They get Chicago in week 15, which has actually been playing pretty well on defense over the past couple of weeks.
Really good lately on defense, like top 5.
Yeah, top 5, and I have them as 6th in defensive EPA since week 8. And I think if you filtered for more recent than that, they've been even better. So they've been playing good ball on defense. They do get the Texans in week 16. Maybe that's the matchup where you pick up Elijah Moore, hope CJ Stroud comes back, and hope that turns into a shootout there. And then again, the Jets week 17. So negative side, tough schedule. Positive side, I don't think you're going to find wide receivers on waivers besides Zay Jones that just have a locked-in role like Elijah Moore does right now. If he's available in your league, I think he's a good person to add, and you might be able to get some flex starts out of him in the fantasy playoffs.
A couple of the running back spots I wanted to hit on this first page. Zamir White is on the list because Josh Jacobs sustained some kind of quad or knee injury, and he's on a short week. So we'll see if he's able to play in this game, but really good spot for Zamir White to get his first NFL spot start if he's able to do so. There was a lot of positive buzz on Zamir White heading into last year. Josh Jacobs just played so well that Zamir White got completely iced, like never to be heard from again. Then the other one is Chase Brown, who got 9 carries in week 13, and then in week 14 catches a screen pass from Jake Browning and goes for a 54-yard touchdown. So if nothing else, Chase Brown should be owned as a handcuff-ish to Joe Mixon, but also showing some standalone value is Chase Brown. So what do you think about those two guys, Zamir White and Chase Brown?
Yeah, I think for Zamir White, the positive here is they'll get the Easton Stick-led Chargers on Thursday night this week. So, I don't feel great about this Aiden O'Connell offense, but if there ever was a game script where Las Vegas could keep it close or maybe even maintain a lead, I think it's going to be against this Chargers team who's been terrible on defense. I think they're going to be terrible on offense now with Easton Stick. So I like Zamir White's chances of getting a bunch of carries. I do think he's pretty game script dependent. If they're in a trailing script, it's going to be a ton of Amir Abdullah in Las Vegas because I don't think they trust Zamir White on passing downs at all. But anyways, feel good about Zamir's chances of racking up a ton of carries, maybe getting a touchdown in that game. Then Chase Brown, I think you framed it well. I'd have him as maybe the best handcuff in fantasy right now because I think there's some chances role continues to grow. These other guys like Rico Dowdle, D'Ernest Johnson, the starters are really well entrenched playing good football. I don't know how good a football Joe Mixon has been playing this season. And I think they've shown an inclination to increase Brown's role in 2 straight weeks now. So I like him a lot as an exciting handcuff and potentially even having some standalone value down the stretch.
Any other guys on this list you want to mention? I mean, I think Antonio Gibson's probably owned in most people's league who was listening to this. Brian Robinson was also back in practice, at least on a limited basis, I believe, early this week. CEH and McKinnon, I think they're owned after Pacheco was out last week. We saw the split in usage there was pretty much as expected. 15 opportunities for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Playing the Chiefs is fine, even if he's not good. Keaton Mitchell, of course, I think is owned as a guy who they don't trust in pass protection, but is going to get some chances at touches. And Deontay Foreman was surprisingly, at least to me, the early down rusher for Chicago in that game. Very good fantasy playoff schedule for Chicago. So anyone else here you want to highlight?
Yeah, Foreman's probably my favorite of that group. And I think he's probably the most widely available in competitive leagues. I think a lot of people thought it was the Roschon Johnson takeover happening in Chicago. And once again, Chicago just kind of confuses us with their backfield rotation. At different points this season, it's been Herbert, it's been Donta Foreman, it's been Roschon Johnson that has been the lead back. They seem to have maybe settled on Foreman whenever he's been healthy over the past couple of weeks. He has been the lead guy when he's been healthy. So, yeah, I think the thing is I could see, people spending on Foreman and then they just switch right back to Roschon. It's been very kind of whack-a-mole running back rotation in Chicago this year. But yeah, Foreman's probably my favorite of that group mentioned. And I think I would even prefer him over Zamir White, Keaton Mitchell, CEH, those type of guys.
All right, let's go to the next page here. The deeper league targets. There's a quarterback conundrum going on across the NFL. Latest quarterback to go down was Justin Herbert, out for the year. So we have Herbert people scrambling. Matthew Stafford, if he's available, has an awesome matchup this week against the Commanders. We've seen Jake Browning be able to manage his way to some big games. Joe Flacco is super aggressive. We have Derek Carr on the list. Will Levis. I would throw Easton Stick and his ability to run a little bit into the mix as well. Maybe people are down to Nick Mullins. I mean, it's bad. Right now, it's hard to tell what people have available on their wire. But yeah, there's certainly options out there, I think, at quarterback in most leagues. And the Stafford stuff, Kupp playing well again, at least for 1 week. Puka continuing to dominate. And you get this really clean matchup for Stafford. Seems like a really good spot. But yeah, any other thoughts for people who are dealing with a Justin Herbert injury?
Yeah, I mean, Stafford's pretty clearly the best option for me just because of the matchup this week against Washington. I think Jordan Love, he's not on this list because he's owned in a ton of spots. He gets Tampa Bay this week. So I saw some people in the Discord asking me about him. He's another really good option, I think, if he's somehow got dropped in your league. But yeah, I think also Desmond Ridder, someone not on this list. Maybe he's too owned, but gets Carolina this week. The tough thing about that is maybe game script versus Carolina. They could get up and just run the ball a million times, but I think he's a decent option as well. But yeah, those are probably a couple of my favorite guys. And then Browning's just been, I don't know what you think about Jake Browning. I think a lot of it's been kind of fluky, like screens that have gone for long touchdowns. That's not really sustainable, but he clearly has good weapons. Maybe you can think of him as Brock Purdy light in a sense, just kind of distributing the ball to the good weapons in Cincinnati. He does get a tough matchup this week versus Minnesota, who've been playing quite good defense over the past month. So, but he does have a good week 16 and 17 playoff schedule. So I'll throw him out for someone to stash maybe for week 16 and 17.
Yeah, and Minnesota is the most blitz happy team in the league. Jake Browning better be ready for that. He kind of reminds me of Colt McCoy a little bit. Like a career backup who doesn't have a big enough arm to actually start in the NFL as a true starter. But yeah, I'm fine with Browning considering the weapons around him. Other guys here in deeper league, all the running backs are the one injury away guys. We did add Jordan Mason this week because Eli Mitchell, I don't really believe in the injury prone stuff, but Eli Mitchell cannot stay on the field, cannot. And so seems like Jordan Mason has a chance to be ahead of him as the handcuff to CMC. But yeah, all those one injury away guys I like carrying right now. I do expect Michael Wilson back this week. I'm not overly excited about that, but I do think that he'll be back. Pop Douglas, hopefully. The state of their wide receiver core, they need him. They actually need him back. But yeah, if with Nico Collins going down, if you have access to Noah Brown, I would definitely be adding him. And then I guess you could add Robert Woods too. But yeah, any other guys you wanted to highlight on this best of rest?
Yeah, Mason was the guy I wanted to highlight. I think that's a change. We've had Mitchell on this list all season. Yeah, man. I don't believe in injury prone much unless it's Elijah Mitchell or Kadarius Toney, and then I guess I do believe in it because I don't know what's up with Eli. He never plays, and then we find out Friday he's had 2 straight DNPs and he's not playing. I don't know what's going on with that guy, but that's a big change to call out. I'd say if you're in a deeper league, super desperation spot start territory, you can throw in Amir Abdullah. He did outsnap Zamir White 4-2 in the 6 snaps without Josh Jacobs. Those were all passing down stuff. So maybe if you're super desperate and you just need someone who's going to project for some points, I can't imagine you're that desperate though. Other wide receivers I'd throw out there would be, again, more desperation territory for probably deeper leagues, but Juju, if both Parker and Pop Douglas are out, I guess he's just going to get 6 or 7 or 8 targets, right? He almost has to. They're playing, is it the Chiefs this week for New England? Yeah, it is the Chiefs in week 15. So they're going to have to throw. Again, hopefully you're not that desperate. And then, yeah, I did like the Michael Wilson call. I think he has some untapped upside with Kyler Murray. We haven't seen him healthy playing with Kyler yet this season. So I would like to see that for a week. Could be a decent stash heading into the next couple weeks.
All right, let's go to the deep league screen here for those in super deep leagues like the FFPC main.
Yeah. So we cut that out because the FFPC stuff no longer has waivers. So this is the deepest we're getting.
Let me vent for a second here. Me and Sam and Dink have a very good FFPC main event team at 2K buy-in. We won the regular season. We won the playoffs despite losing Mark Andrews. And this is tight end premium. Losing Mark Andrews is just devastating. I was like, oh, we'll just pick up Isaiah Likely. there was some weird FFPC rule where we weren't able to add Isaiah Likely. So yeah, it's all about the fairness and competitiveness of a tournament where it's $1 million to first. I get it, but it was really frustrating not to be able to add guys. So yes, no more waivers in FFPC or these high stake leagues. So yeah, sorry for my tilt. I know no one cares about our fantasy team, but yeah, just had to get that off my chest.
Yeah. I will quickly mention on tight end. I know we didn't touch that. Again, desperate deeper league. Davis Allen, I think if both those Rams tight ends remain out, actually had a pretty good role. I don't know anything about Davis Allen, but he ran a bunch of routes. Both Tyler Higbee and Hunter Long were banged up. So he's someone who's going to be available everywhere. You can maybe consider, but yeah.
All right. Let's get to some questions from the people. Oh, I did want to note, Sam's waiver column is going to be reduced going forward. We want to point you guys to the article we have on the site. If you go to NFL Fantasy and then you go to analysis, there's an article titled Players to Stash Fantasy Playoffs. We are updating that. And, at this point, I think everybody understands who's available on waivers. You're in the playoffs. It's more about trying to optimize your roster for handcuffs and defense and kicker.
Yep.
So please go to that article going forward through the rest of the playoffs. Again, we're doing our best to keep that updated. All right. Joe says, is Noah Brown worth holding on to over Odell Beckham? Pretty brutal showing from in a spot where he had no other target competition last week. I don't want to hold it against Noah Brown that he failed against the Jets. What I am concerned about is CJ Stroud being out. I mean, Davis Mills is inept, and I don't think Noah Brown's really as good of a player as he showed over those previous few weeks. Meanwhile, Odell Beckham is on an absolute tear, much to my chagrin. So I think I'd actually prefer Odell over Noah Brown right here, Sam, but it's painful for me to say that. What do you think?
I think I'm taking Odell just for the talent. Like, the situation for Noah Brown is better if Stroud can come back and he's clearly, even with Nico Collins, if we assume Nico Collins is healthy too, Noah Brown is still going to be running a ton of routes. But man, Odell, like, they're almost using him kind of like Kansas City is using Rashee Rice, I guess, if you want to compare it to that. Like, he's running a limited number of routes, but he's just seeing consistent targets each and every week. And he's also consistently making big plays. I would recommend people check out his route this past week. I think it was like a 50-yard touchdown, split two defenders with an awesome move, awesome ball tracking, made a diving catch. Like, I just think Odell's back playing great football. And with CJ Stroud banged up, I think I trust that over Noah Brown now. But it definitely feels like a challenging call, just given how limited the role still is for Odell.
Well, I think they know if they try to play him more, he's going to get hurt, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So he's only going to run a route, maybe, 50%, something like that. But yeah.
Yeah.
MLB P-Mouse says, is Ezekiel Elliott still the top running back to pick up? Do we prefer him over a stash like Dowdle? My other running backs are shaky. Eckler, Moss, Walker, Charbonnet, Aaron Jones, McKinnon. I mean, Zeke should not be on waivers right now, period. No. He is his role was outrageous on Thursday night in the first game with Ramondre Stevenson out. There's rumors that Ramondre could be out a while or rest of season. So Zeke should be owned right now without a doubt. I'd certainly rather have him than someone like McKinnon. I don't know that I'd personally be comfortable that like starting Zeke against the Chiefs. But yeah, I think he should be owned. So yeah, any more Zeke takes?
Yeah, I think he's pretty like, again, I can't say I feel like amazing starting him against the Chiefs, but he's pretty game script independent. Like, what do you have? 7 catches for 70 yards last week. Like, it doesn't matter if they're winning or losing. They don't trust Ty Montgomery. They don't trust Kevin Harris. I don't even know who else was active last week for New England because it didn't matter. It was only Zeke. So I don't see them going away from that this next week or, until Ramondre comes back.
Yeah, his pass game efficiency will go down. Like 7 catches for 72 yards from Zeke is not happening again, I don't think. But
no.
Yeah.
8 catches for 23 yards. That'll probably happen
again. Would you take Zeke over Dowdle? So we had a few questions along these lines. Like, at what point do you cut a handcuff for someone you need? And if you think that you need to start Zeke, then of course I'd rather have him than Rico Dowdle right now. But what if you didn't need to start Zeke? I still feel like I'd probably rather have Zeke than Dowdle.
I'm taking him to block my opponent. Like, I think Zeke is like what he's going to project as like the RB 15 this next coming week. Like, you want that to block your opponents, even if you don't need to start him. So I'm taking Zeke pretty easily here.
Yep. Colin says, I lost Justin Herbert for the year. I have Sam Howell. Which quarterback should I add out of Zach Wilson, Easton Stick, Aaron Rodgers, Desmond Ritter, Trubisky, Zappy? Oh, boy. Well, at least you have Sam Howell. I think I saw a stat, which is really easy to look up. I should have just confirmed it, but Sam Howell has more fantasy points this year than Patrick Mahomes. Is that possible? I need to double check that.
I think that's true. I think that is true. Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. So good thing you have Howell, but in terms of these ads, Sam, who do you like out of Zach Wilson, Easton Stick? I would throw Aaron Rodgers out. I don't think he's going to play. Desmond Ritter. I would throw Trubisky out as inept in an inept offense, and I would throw Zappy out as inept in an inept offense. So really, it's Ritter, Stick, or Zach Wilson.
For me, it'd be Ritter. They have a decent stretch of matchups the next 2 weeks versus Carolina, who just is bad all around week 15, and then the Colts have been an okay matchup for quarterbacks in week 16. Yeah, man, but it's just process of elimination. I question for this guy asking the question, like, is this a super flex league? Because if it's just one quarterback, I don't think I'm messing around with a backup quarterback on this Howell team. Like, even though Howell has a tough playoff schedule, I'm riding him over all of these guys like pretty easily just for his rushing floor. I'd probably rather add like a backup defense if I'm this team, or a Dowdle, Dernis Johnson type running back stash. I don't think I'm messing around with these backup quarterbacks at all.
The Master says Ritter or Browning this week, hoping that Stroud makes it back for next week. So schedules here: Ritter at the Panthers, Browning plays
the Vikings, I believe.
The Vikings. So yeah, I think that would be Ritter for me. I don't think people understand how good the Vikings defense has been for really the entire year. I think that'd be Ritter for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going Ritter just for the matchup, and he can add a little bit rushing, hopefully.
Zipancho says, can we possibly start Tommy DeVito, Tommy Fajul, or whatever they're calling him, Tommy Cutlets, versus the Eagles in week 16 and feel good? I wouldn't feel good about starting Tommy DeVito, but he showed you he can run for 70 yards last night. Philly is like one of the best possible matchups for a quarterback.
Yeah.
What do you think about DeVito against the Eagles in week 16?
I mean, comfortable. I feel good about it. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's a great matchup. I don't think they're going back to Tyrod Taylor, so I'm assuming this is a super flex league where you're considering DeVito. I do think he's better. Like, if your alternatives are Zach Wilson, Bailey Zappi, Trubisky, like those guys, I think I prefer DeVito over those guys, especially in week 16.
Yeah, for sure. MLBP is back. He says, I got the number 1 seed and Jalen Hurts is my quarterback. Would you roster a backup like Stafford or a second defense like the Jets or running back like Dowdle? I mean, if I have Hurts, there's no way I'm benching him. If he goes down, I'll likely be able to pick up a decent quarterback anyways. So it would be a defense or one injury away running back. I think that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Footy Talk says, is Denver defense sneakily the best pick of the year for the playoffs? Potentially great final 2 matchups if Herbert is done for the year. Herbert is indeed done for the year. Yeah, we'll probably add Broncos defense to our stashes now that Herbert is done for the year. I think that's an interesting one. They've been playing much better. I mean, ever since they gave up 70 points, something's clicked with them for sure. So yeah, I think that's an interesting one.
Since week 8, they're the best defense in the NFL per EPA per play. So yeah, better than the Jets, better than the Browns, better than everyone.
That's crazy. All right, last one here from Kyle. He says, if Psych does not require you to roster a kicker and or defense, should a team with a bye drop kicker and defense to carry extra backup running backs in case injury happens? So I prioritize defense for the fantasy playoffs. Like, I'm carrying 2 defenses in a bunch of my leagues right now because I want to block my opponent and I want to have choices in weeks 15, 16, 17. Kicker, I wouldn't worry about that much. So defense, though, I would probably prioritize planning out ahead who you're going to play. Any thoughts on this one, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's similar to you. I don't want to play it fast and loose with defense. I'd prioritize getting a defense that you at least feel really good about in week 16. At kicker, I'm okay with this strategy. If you don't have a great kicker, like say I have Justin Tucker, Brandon Aubrey. There's no way I'm dropping one of those guys because, man, they're on great defenses. They're awesome kickers. There's no point in doing that. But if you have, Jason Myers or Jason Sanders or one of these other just like mediocre kickers and someone like Rico Dowdle is available on waivers, I'm fine with dropping your kicker for someone like that because you're very likely going to be able to add a kicker the next week that projects identical to those guys anyways. So, in short, I'm fine doing this a kicker, probably not doing it a defense.
I have the Young Ho Koo as my kicker set up for a team I have a really good team in for week 16, home versus the Colts. So you get a dome, you get the Young Ho, who is historically a very good kicker, and a team that is not that great in the red zone. So that's one that I've been stashing is Young Ho for that week 16 home game in the dome against the Colts. So just throw that out there on kickers. All right. That's going to do it for this playoff preview edition of the Waiver Wire Show. Not sure if we're going to be back next week on the show. I tend to doubt it because there will only be roughly 4 teams left in your playoffs, and we will be updating the fantasy players to stash. So appreciate all of you who have been here all year. If this is indeed the last show, it was a lot of fun. I'm not the most serious season-long bro at this point in my life, but I do find it very, very interesting and helpful and fascinating to think through this stuff. And I was somewhat energized by our team's main event run this year, injecting the season-long blood back into my life. So we had a lot of fun doing the show. Thanks everybody for tuning in each and every week. Thanks for reading Sam's article each and every week. I know he put a ton of time into it. It is way more intensive than people realize to do waiver wire. I used to write the waiver wire column for Roto World from 2006 or 7 to like 2014 or something. And I dreaded it. I dreaded it every week. But it was good. It was a good way to think about kind of thin plays and stuff like that. So yeah, appreciate y'all being all here all year. This is the first year we did this show. Hope you guys liked it, but we're open to any feedback on what we can do better next year or anything like that.
Yep. Had a blast. And yeah, thanks to all the listeners. And just to be clear, the article will still be up the next couple weeks at least. So even if this is our last show, you can still certainly find the waiver wire ads article up on the website.
Yep. All right. Perfect. For Sam. For producer Ryan. For producer Steven. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.